didn't want a part of, or maybe you just realize that wasn't for me, and you turn around and you try to run, and you run as fast as you can. And every time you see that situation come back, or maybe every time you see that come your way, you just continue to run even faster. How many have ever done that? How many ever ran from something? Dogs included and everything. And for this man, he was going down the road, and he went under an overpass, and he was going quite a speed, and there was a state trooper there, and he hit his lights, and he turned out behind this guy, and he ended up chasing this guy. And the closer he got to the guy, the farther this guy would press the gas pedal and keep on going. And he ended up chasing him for quite a while. And finally, the man decided to pull over, and the state trooper walked up there, and he talked to the guy, and he said, "Man, haven't you seen me? I've been tracking you and following you and chasing you for miles." He said, "Yeah, I seen you." He said, "Well, why didn't you pull over?" And he said, "Well, a few years ago, my wife ran off with one of the state troopers." And he goes, "I just thought you were bringing her back to me." I believe if you would agree with me tonight, I believe that we all love listening to messages about how great our God is, don't we? We love to listen to those messages about how powerful He is and the blessings that come from Him. We love to hear stories like that. We love to hear messages about that. We love to read scriptures about His love. Things that remind us who He is. Reminds us that God is our rock, that He's our fortress, that He's our strong tower, that He's the King of kings, the Lord of lords. We love to read scriptures, and we'll continue to read scriptures because we want to remind ourselves how great our God is, don't we? We can preach on these passages, can't we, brother? And we love to preach on these passages. Why? Because we know that that's what lifts people up. That's what makes people feel good. And we want people to feel good sometimes, don't we? We want people to leave out of here on a Sunday morning with a smile on their face, feeling all good about themselves. And so we'll preach on these messages. But sometimes, brother, we can't preach on those messages, can we? Sometimes we can't preach on all the blessings and all the good stuff and all the stuff that makes us feel all good inside. Sometimes we can't preach on messages like that. Sometimes we got to preach on hell, don't we? Sometimes we got to preach on how hard it is. And if you don't change, that's where we're going. And we don't want to talk about that. And there's other scriptures and other passages that sometimes we try to avoid because we're afraid to, maybe we'll offend somebody or maybe we'll step on somebody's toes in the service. Tonight, we're going to be looking at one of God's parables. Tonight, we're going to be looking at the prodigal son, also known as the lost son, the running father, the love-sick father. And whatever you call it, whatever you want to say it is, I'll tell you it's one of the greatest parables in the Bibles for me. If you got your Bibles and if you turn to Luke chapter 15 with me just tonight, Luke chapter 15, we're going to jump right into this story. Luke chapter 15, verse 11. Luke chapter 15, verse 11. Then he said, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided to them his livelihood, and not many days after the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and then wasted his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all this, arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of the country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. Verse 16, and he went, and he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will rise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servant, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Bring a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. The story of the prodigal son comes following the parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin. It's also a response to the Pharisee statement that says that this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. In this story, there's so much that's going on. There's so much that we can focus on in this story. There's so many different passages and scriptures on this story and different parts of the story that we can really zone in on. But tonight I want to focus on the rebel in this story. Tonight I want to focus on the rebellion son. The son that it's all about me. It's all about me. It's me, me, me. How many have ever heard someone like that? How many of somebody knows someone like that? And what comes to mind when I think of a prodigal son? What comes to your mind? Devil trying to whoop on me. I'm going to preach this morning, tonight. But what comes to your mind when you think about the prodigal son or of a prodigal son? Is it a rebellion son? Is it someone that has disrespect for authority? Someone who crosses boundaries? Someone who's unteachable? Someone has no respect for no one but themselves? Someone who is selfish? Someone who goes beyond self-destructive behavior? Someone who puts herself in drugs and alcohol? Someone who puts herself in the stealing and the violence? And the list could go on, couldn't it? And if I walked around to every one of you guys would have something different to say about a prodigal son or what a prodigal son means to you. Some of you guys could say, I know a prodigal son. Some of you could say that I've been around a prodigal son. But I guarantee none of us, when I say, what's a prodigal son? I guarantee none of us would be like, that's me. I guarantee none of us would be honest enough to say, that was me one time. I was a prodigal son. But it's okay because we're really not looking at your story tonight. We really ain't focusing on you. We're going to focus on this story. We want to see this prodigal son story. The first thing we see here is we see a boy who wants his father dead. And you can say, man, I didn't see that. I didn't see where he said, man, I want you dead. But the first thing we see is that he's asking for his inheritance, right? And an inheritance is something that you get after one of your loved ones have passed away. And it's something that it belonged to them, but after they passed away, they give it to you, don't it? That's what an inheritance is. So what this son is really saying to this father is, I'd rather you die so I can go ahead and have my stuff. I want to go ahead and get what was coming to me. I don't want to wait no longer. I want it now. Give me my inheritance. Why don't you go ahead and just die? Now, if I'd have said that to my dad, he'd have gave me something that was coming. But I guarantee you I wouldn't have been able to sit down for a week. Have you ever had someone say, I'd rather you die than be in my life? I don't want to look at you no more. I don't want to see you no more. I don't want to talk to you no more. If it would just be better if you just get out of my life. I'm tired of living under your roof. I'm tired of living under your rules. I'm tired of living the way you want me to live. I want out of it. I wish you would just die or just leave me alone. Just give me what's mine. Give me what you promised me. Just give it to me and just leave me alone. Get out of my life. As a father, I can imagine those words that were spoken to this father. And so much of us, we wouldn't want to imagine those words, would we? As a father of 2 young boys, I can imagine one of them coming to me and say, Dad, I don't care about you no more. Dad, I don't want you no more. Why don't you just die? I can imagine what that must have felt like for this father. The second thing we see in this passage is a father who is willing to give his son half the inheritance. He's willing to go ahead. We see a loving father. A father who cares about his son so much in the heat of the battle, in the heat of the fight, even though after he just heard everything that his son had to say to him, I don't want you no more. I don't want nothing to do with you. I just want what's promised to me, that you just go ahead and give it to me, and I'll get out of here. We see a loving father that after all of that, he said, okay, here. If that's what you really want, here you go. I'll go ahead and give it to you. Even though I know it's not good for you right now, even though I know that you don't understand at all, even though I know that you don't have the responsibility to get it right now, but if that's what you want, here it is. A loving father. Second, we also see that it's a father of slow anger. A father who can control his anger. I don't think my father could have controlled his anger at that moment if I'd have said those words. Would you have been able to do that? Would you have been able to look at your son or someone who's telling you these hurtful words and say, okay, if that's what you want, here? No. But in this story, we see that. We see a man of slow anger. Because we see that this father, after all of this, he still gives his son what he was giving him. And we also see that his son got together all of his belongings. His son collected everything. His dad just didn't throw him out. His dad didn't say, well, here's here and get out of here. If you don't want to live under my roof, go ahead and get out of here. If you don't want to listen to me, then why are you still here? Leave everything else behind. No, we see a father that says, go ahead and collect it. Go ahead and take your time. Get what you need. Take what you want. Make sure you get your clothes. Make sure you get your shoes. Don't forget your iPhone that I bought you. Don't forget your iPad that I bought you. And heaven forbid, do not forget the chargers. It's not a good road trip when you're going down the road and the iPad goes out, is it? So make sure you get your chargers. Make sure you gather everything that you need. Make sure you go to the bank and get your money out. Make sure that you empty the savings accounts. Make sure you get the college funds. Make sure you get everything. And this boy was getting everything because he said he gathered up all of his things. And his father watched him load it all up and drive out. Drive out in probably the vehicle that he bought him, the vehicle that he's still paying insurance on. And he drove out. He drove to a place, a foreign place, a far-off country. Probably drove to Las Vegas because it states that he drove to a far-distance country. He left. Church, anytime you walk out of the presence of God, you're in a whole nother country. You're in a whole nother world the moment you walk out of the presence of God, the moment you turn around. So tonight we're going to say he drove to Vegas, a town where every prodigal son would want to go to, a place with no rules, a city that has no bedtime, a city that never gets dark, a city with no curfew, a city that has earned the reputation to be called Sin City, home of fine dining, Game Central, entertainment capital of the world. He went. He got away. He got away from the rules. He got away from the responsibilities. He went somewhere where there was no rules, no responsibilities. No one telling him what to do. No one trying to control him. You know, in Vegas, most of the crime that happens there is by a younger generation, it says. Statistics says. Most of the crime, right? The highest of the crime is done by the younger generations that flock there by the numbers. They're looking for a good time. They're looking to get away. And don't get me wrong, the older people are there. Don't get me wrong, the older ones are there too. They're the ones that are teaching it. They're the ones that are showing it. They're the ones putting it out there. They're the ones trying to get our younger ones to sell it for us. They're the ones that are trying to get our younger generation to market it for us. And they're making it easier and easier for our younger generations to get a hold of it. While they sit back and watch this generation fall apart because of it. Maybe this is where we get our saying, easy come and easy go. Easy come and easy go. He took everything his father ever had. He took everything that his father worked for, his family worked for, and he took it with him. And he took it to this foreign country, and he ran with it. Did he have a great time? Did he enjoy himself? For a little while. Yeah, he enjoyed himself. Yeah, he had fun. Man, he's free. He's out. He's doing what he wants to do. Hebrews 11:25 tells us that there is pleasure in sin. There is pleasure in sin. But so many people forget this part. But for a short season. He had the Mustang, guys. He had the iPhones. He had the iPad. He was living in the suite at the Grand Royal Hotel. He was living life. He had all the money. He had all the friends. He was able to go out to the local taverns and spend all the money and buying his friends. They're paying their tabs, paying his friends to have a great time, taking out all the women on the town, buying them all kinds of stuff. He was living life. He was enjoying himself. He was living the good life until the good life runs out. Until the money runs out, Pastor. Because when the money runs out, you find out who your friends are really quick. Quit buying them and paying their tabs off. Quit handing that money out to them. Quit taking them women out in the town. Watch who ends up around you at the end. He can't afford his phone bill anymore. He can't afford to stay in the Royal Hotel. So he finds himself sleeping on a park bench outside of that Royal Hotel. Before he knew it, before he knew what he had was gone. It was gone. One moment it was there. One moment he was living life, enjoying what he wanted to do. And the next moment, he finds himself living and working with pigs, eating out of the troughs of pigs. He found himself at rock bottom with nowhere to go. See, back then the Jewish leaders, feeding swine was the lowest you could go at that time. See, pork was a forbidden meat. You didn't eat it because swine was considered one of the most unclean animals. So for him to be actually feeding and living and eating with the swine, we can only imagine how bad a situation could have been. We can only imagine how bad it got. And now is when we start seeing this story reach the bottom. Now is when we start seeing a turning point. Isn't it funny how it takes us to hit rock bottom before we start looking up? Isn't it funny that we have to get to the lowest of the lowest before we start to realize what we had? What we left behind? It's funny how we have to hit rock bottom before we understand that, man, it was a blessing to have a roof over your head. It was a blessing to have a hot meal. It was a blessing to know that someone loved you. It was a blessing that you could actually sit at a dinner table with family and not sit at a pig trough with a bunch of pigs. He started thinking how his father's servants, how his father's workers had it better than him. And he was like, man, look at me. Look at my situation. Look what I've got myself into. Man, I'm rolling around in pig slop, in mud. And my father's servants, man, at least they got a roof over their head. At least they'll get a hot meal tonight. Man, what am I doing? What am I doing here? What have I got myself into? Man, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of this pig pen. I've got to get out of this mess. I've got to get home. And that's where we find this story. That's where we see the journey home. He finally came to his senses, guys. He finally understood his blessings and what he had. And this is where we see the son, and he's going home. He said, man, I'm out of here. I'm leaving this stuff behind. And he crawls out of that pig pen, and he starts headed home. And see, for a lot of us, this is where it gets hard. Because this is when it really, really gets real. Because a lot of us, we know we've hit rock bottom. We know we've got ourselves in a bad situation. We know it stinks. But man, going home, going back to the real life, going back to that spouse that we left, going back to that broken home, going back to the ones that we hurt, going back to church, going back to God. Man, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? I can imagine that was probably going through this young boy's life. Man, I've made a mistake. I said some hurtful things to my dad. Man, I told him I'd rather see him die. I told him I'd rather never see him again. But man, I can't stay here. I've got to come up with something. I've got to think of something to say. Sometimes we had to think of something to say, didn't we? Sometimes we had to think of, man, how am I going to say this? How am I going to say sorry? His speech probably went like, Father, I know I sinned against you. I know I sinned against you, Father, and maybe God, I don't need to be really worthy to be called your son, and maybe you treat me like one of your servants. That'll be okay. I mean, it's better than what I've been at. That'll be okay. Just call me one of your servants. You don't have to call me a child. You don't have to call me your son. And maybe if that don't work, maybe I'll add a little puppy dog eyes, or maybe I'll pump out my lip, or Maybe I'll cry a little bit. Maybe I can batter my eyes a little bit. Fathers, if you got daughters in here, you know what that means. Well, daughter looks up at you and she starts battering their eyes. It's all down here, ain't it? They're going to get what they wanted. Maybe I can do that. Maybe if I say that, maybe he'll let me in. Maybe he'll let me come back. Maybe he'll just let me work his fields for him. I don't know. But I need to go back. I don't know how he's going to handle it. What this kid didn't know, and what so many of us didn't know, is that the dad wanted him back. What the son didn't know is that his father's been up all night. His father goes in his bedroom every night and he kneels beside his son's bed and he prays for him. And he prays that God would bring him back. And he's praying that God, he would get that phone call. And not the phone call that his son's dead. Not the phone call that his son ended up in a ditch because he'd rather drink and drive. Not the phone call that his son ended up in jail. But the phone call with his son's voice on the other side that says, Dad, I'm coming home. The son didn't know that he waited day in and day out by the phone, waiting to hear his son's voice. The son didn't know that every morning that his father got up, he walked out on the front porch and he looked out over the fields, looking and hoping he would see his son coming his way. But as the son came to the driveway, he looked up and he seen his father running to him. And I can imagine what this son was thinking. He's like, there's my dad. Oh no, he's coming. What's he going to say? Is he going to yell at me? Is he going to holler at me? Is he going to tell me to go away? He don't need me no more? Is he going to judge me? Is he going to criticize me for what I've done with my life? Why is he running to me? Why is he coming towards me? I should be going towards him. And about that moment, his father ran to him with open arms. And he grabbed his son and he just held him. And he kissed him. And at that moment, the son started to tell his dad, he said, Dad, I'm sorry. Dad, I've sinned against you. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be here. And over his son's voice, he couldn't even finish telling him what all he'd done because his dad was hollering, guys, get me some clothes. Guys, go get me the fatted cow. Guys, bring me the ring. Guys, my son has come home. He's come home. Let's have a party. Let's have a welcome party. He's come home. He's here. See, his father didn't care all that he did out there. His father didn't care of all the mistakes that he made out there. Everywhere he ended up. All that mattered to the father was that he came home. He brought it home. He came home. See, this story reveals a father's love for his children. And it paints a picture of how our Father sees us and feels about us every day. Every day that we're out there. He says, if you just come home. If you just come home. I ran across this the other day and it said the things that you would never hear your dad say. One of the things that says, well, now since you're 13, princess, I want you to start dating older boys. Son, I don't never want you to get a job. I want you to stay home. I want you to live here forever. Me and your mother's going out for the weekend, so go ahead and invite all your friends over and just party it up. You don't need money. Here's my credit cards. Take it. Get what you need. The good news is tonight, the one thing your Heavenly Father would never say is if you walk out, you'll never be able to come back in. I'm so thankful that of everything I've done in my life, that my Father is still standing there with open arms. He said, I don't care how messed up you might think your life is. I don't care the situations you've got yourself into. I knew all of that. I knew that 2,000 years ago when I sent my son Jesus for you. I loved you that much. I was willing to chase after you. And I chased you with my son all the way up that old rugged cross. And he stretched out his hands for you. Because he just wants you to come home. He just wants you to come back to the feet of Jesus. Man, what a blessing. But you know what, guys? In that story, we see a loving Father. We see a Father that cared about his son. But you know what we didn't see? That Father knew what his son was into. He knew he was out there doing stuff he shouldn't be doing. The Father never went to the pig pen. The Father never went to Sin City. He stayed right where he was at. Because sometimes you got to let him go. As hard as it is, sometimes you got to let them hit rock bottom. Because if you continue to chase after them, if you continue to pull them out of those situations, every time they mess up, you run to their rescue. And I know parents, we want to run to our children's rescue. But sometimes we just got to step back. Sometimes we just got to let them hit rock bottom, and that's hard. He didn't go to the pig pen. But it didn't mean that he didn't love them. And it didn't mean that he wasn't waiting there at home every night praying that he would just come home. Some of us have walked away from God because we thought we could have a better life without him. We thought we could have more fun on a Sunday doing other stuff than coming to church. A life without rules. As I said earlier, there's pleasure in sin. Oh, but for just a short period of time. There's pleasure in partying and having fun with friends and going to the drunken parties, but the hangover comes in the morning, Pastor. The headaches come in the morning. Yes, there's drugs that get you high, but comes the addiction that comes with it later. The thing that grabs you that won't let you go. Yeah, there's sex outside of marriage, but yeah, there comes the unwanted pregnancy, the diseases that come with it. A life without God is a ruined life, church. It's a life of mess. See, the problem with sin is it's never truly fulfilling. If you get one high, you got to have another high. And if it quits working, you find another drug, you find another high. If you got $100, you want $1,000. It's never enough. If you date one girl, you think you got to date the whole entire senior class, Gary. We see a loving Father. See, when we think we run from God, we think to ourselves, we're free. But the truth is, we're actually becoming captured by our own sin, by our own mistakes. Throughout my ministry, I've seen prodigals come and go. They've been in teenagers, they've been in adults. And these kids and these adults, man, they live in their life. They'll come into church and they're living a godly life, but there's something in their life, and sometime in their life they'll just stop. And they'll think, well, maybe I'll be better off. And they go off and they live their own life. They think, man, maybe I can do it better on my own. These people have walked away from God's blessings. And they end up in a mess. Some of them are still living out their life, living out their mess. I don't know why you're here tonight. Maybe you know what it feels like to come home. Maybe you know what it realizes to live that life and know what it feels like out there. But there's nothing like living a life where God's in control. I believe God wants us to come home. I believe God needs us to come home. But before we can come home, we have to be willing to give it all back to God. See, the Bible tells us that we can't serve two gods. We can't have two gods in our lives. We can't come home thinking, well, we'll live this life. And we'll live this life. We're right on the fence line. And we can do both. We can balance both of them. And what ends up happening is we get farther and farther away from the promises, from the hope that God has given us. We get farther and farther away from what God is wanting us to get. And we'll keep looking back. We'll keep seeing it, and we're like, yeah, I still love God. I still love God. I'll come to church when I can. I'll come to Sunday school when I can. I'll spend time with God when I can. Man, I know, man, Easter's coming. I'll go. I'll go to Easter service. That's good, ain't it, God? And before you know it, you're so far away. And before you know it, you're trying to turn around. And when you turn around, you're so far away, you can't even see where you're supposed to be at. You can't even see where you were supposed to be at. You can't even see the life that God has promised you, that God wants you to have. Because you've taken away from it. You decided, man, I'll get back to you, God. I'll come back. And you end up messing up. And you get so far back till you can't go no farther. And you hit rock bottom. There's nowhere else to go. There's a wall there. And the only thing we can do now is turn around and we start to look. My God, I'll come forward for just a moment. And we'll start to look and say, where am I at? Where have I been? Man, this is not what I programmed in my GPS. This is not what it looked like. This is not what I thought it was going to look like. This is not what the picture looked like. This is not what I thought my dreams were supposed to look like. And the next thing you can do is, the only thing you can do is look back for where you were at. And say, man, I remember a time. I remember a time when I had it. When I had the blessings. When I had God in my life. And you look back and all you can see is God's arms still stretched wide open. And he's still there with his arms wide open and he says, I'm still here. I'm still where you left me. Some of us has just left him on the cross hanging. He said, I'm still here. And it's like, man, I know I need to get there. I know I need to go there. But man, I got so much baggage. I've done so much. I don't even know what to say to him. I don't even know what to say when I get there. Man, I'm so worried about what everybody else will say. Man, I wonder if they'll judge me if I get up right now. I wonder what they'll start saying if I start walking forward. But man, I got to go. But I got so much stuff. I got so much stuff to carry with me. But I got to go. I don't have no choice. I'll just drag it with me. And I'll carry it with me all the way down. And every time we get closer, the devil wants to just pull us back. Everything in our baggage, everything in our luggage just wants to drag us back. But you know you can't. And there's a time in your life where you only know to come home, church. There's a time in your life where you only know to come to the feet of Jesus and get back where you belong. And when you get here, when you finally get home, church, when you finally get back to Jesus, you take your luggage, you take your baggage, and you set it down. And you begin slowly opening it up. And you begin to look in it. It's like, oh God, you don't want to see this. And you start to You start to fumble around and you're looking for the first thing that you want to show them. And you got so much in here. It's like, I don't know. I don't even know where to start. There's so much in here. And then you start pulling things out one by one. And you're like, Jesus, this is my family, Jesus. This is my wife and my kids and me. And I want them to bring them to you. I want you to have my family. I want you to be in my family's life. I want my family to know you. I want my kids to grow up knowing you. I want them to have a relationship with you. Jesus, I want them to love you. Here, take it. It's yours. And you give that out. And you go back and you're looking and it's like, man, what can I do? And this is just this beautiful picture of a house that my boy drew. It's our dream home. And it's like, Jesus, it's my house. This is what I try to control, but I can't. From this day forward, for me and my house, we're going to serve you. There it is. It belongs to you. And we'll go back to our luggage and we'll go back to looking at things. And we're like, man, look, Jesus, man, woo, I love to fish. Woo, it's a good thing to fish. And I got pretty good at it, Jesus. I really did. And I went from catching bait, because that's all it was good for. I couldn't eat it. It was too small. But then I started catching bigger fish, Jesus. Woo, I caught some big fish. But what I found out that the big fish only bite on Sundays. So I kind of quit going to church. And I kind of turned and started going fishing. And I love to fish, Jesus. But I don't love as much as I love you. And I love football. Oh, I love football. I love watching the games. And man, it's exciting. And Jesus, you know. Now, you know the only time you can see the Georgia Bulldogs whoop up on the Florida Gators is on a Sunday morning. You know that. But I know that anything I put before you is an idol. I don't want no idols no more. I don't want no idols. And we'll go back and we'll continue to dig because we got so much to get back to you. And we'll pull out something. But Jesus, this is hard for me. Because this is something that's kept in my heart and something that it just bothers me and it's pain. But this is a picture of me and my little girl. And this is a situation I don't understand, and it's something that I've had hate and I've had anger for so many years. But Jesus, I can't keep that no more. I want you to have it. It's yours. It's all yours. And we'll go back and we'll start looking. And we'll say, man, this is a hard one. You know, because we all love money, don't we? We all got to have money, don't we? And Jesus, man, I love money, but Jesus, I'm bad with it. Jesus, I make good money, but I can't keep it. I get a good paycheck, but man, I lose it, and I'm looking for the next paycheck. So I want you to have my money, Jesus. No, I want you to have it all, okay? I don't even want any of it. You just take it all, okay? I want you over my finances. I want you over the control of my money. Because I know the money is the root of all evil. But I know if I give you my money, Jesus, if I trust you with my money, you will meet all my needs according to your glorious and riches. So you have my money, Jesus. I don't have much left, Jesus. I don't have much left in this old baggage. The only thing I have left is just, it ain't much. It's been stepped on. It's been ripped. It's been broken. It's been just rolled up. It's been stomped on. But Jesus, if I can just unravel it for just a moment. Let me get some of the creases out for you, Jesus. Jesus, it ain't much. But it's all I have left. And I want to give you my heart today. Because I want you in my life. I want you in my heart, Jesus. I need you in my heart. I need you in my family. I need you in my finances. I need you in every part of my life. Because I try to control it and I just mess it up. So Jesus, there it is. It's all yours. It's all I have left. It ain't much, I know.
That's all I ever wanted.
Thank you, Jesus. What are you running from, church? What are you trying to hide from? What's keeping you from coming home where you belong? In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy had it right. There's no place like home, is there, church? There's no place like being in the presence of God. Will you come home tonight? Will you quit running? Will you quit thinking that you have everything together, that you can control it? Will you come home tonight, church? As we close out and they begin to play, come home. Bring it back to Jesus tonight. Bring your finances, your marriage, your family. But most of all, bring your heart back to Jesus. Will you come, brother?